The first question is from Sarah Adler, our viewer of last episode. I guess this is a great gateway question. How has your perception of God changed given your life experiences, given your childhood throughout Massachusetts?
And not only that, you're like, everything that you've told us so far, your biography, essentially, like, how has that changed your perception of God?
I think our perception of God evolves and changes as we do. It was Elie Wiesel who famously said, you can question God, you could be angry with God, you can have gratitude towards God, you can question God, but you can never ignore God. And so I think that has primarily been my trajectory. As I evolved, as my exposure to Jewish text and Jewish experience has become more profound, opening up the Talmud for the first time when you're 19 or 20 years old, and you suddenly realize that the 3,000-year tradition of the Jewish people is one of the most complicated and beautiful and philosophically sound in human history, then your exposure and experience with God is going to change too. The more halacha and Jewish law I studied, the more my appreciation for Jewish intellect increased, but also questions and concerns about where I stood on the observance scale and where God fit into observance. And as I sort of emerged in my life as a husband and father, you'll see this when you have children and you see the real miracle of life. And it's not, the splitting of a zygote or the biology of the human being. It's the neshama. It's the soul. It's that nefesh from God that is breathed into a human being that makes them them. When you see that, your appreciation for the miracle of what it is that we live in is there.
So, like, truly understanding and, like, diving into this research and, like, rather than just, like, trying to find something, if you really just are grateful and understand and like try to just, I mean, obviously you can't even wrap your mind around such a text, but like kind of just understanding allowed you to become like spiritually closer and allow you to like understanding.
Somewhat. I mean, I think for me, we are a part of a 3,000-year story. That 3,000-year story has been attempted to be erased or snuffed out generation after generation, calamity after calamity, from the destruction of the first temple to the Shoah, Oz, to the Jews being stuck behind the Iron Curtain and told that they can't practice religion. Right? That's your family dynamic. So I knew from a very young age that there had to be something of utility. There had to be something profound and accessible and relevant for Judaism to continue. Now, Judaism is very important to understand. Judaism is the religion that's practiced by the Jewish people, right? And the Jewish people approach Judaism in a variety of different ways, which is why, for example, I may wear a kippah, but the person who you had on your last podcast may have payas and tzitzit down to their ankles. I don't know. Or for example, you have cousins in Israel who may not go to shul. So Judaism has grown, evolved, and obviously become more robust as we've projected ourselves into the texts generation after generation. But I always knew that for Judaism to exist, for the Jewish people to remain alive, there's got to be something there. And that's what led me to learn and study. I got kicked out of Hebrew school when I was 13 or 14, right after my bar mitzvah. I got kicked out before, too. But, my parents sort of bribed me to stay so that I had my bar mitzvah. And then I was subsequently thrown out for bringing my football equipment into the classroom and causing a ruckus by banging my helmet against the side of the wall when the teachers were trying to teach. But though I got kicked out of Hebrew school, I would go to the library a couple of times for the week. We used to have these things called libraries where they had books on walls and shelves, and there was something called a card catalog that you have to open up. No internet. Open up the card catalog, and there'd be a list of books in alphabetical order. And so I would go to J, and I looked in the card catalog under Jewish, and I read every single book in the library that had anything to do with Judaism because I wanted to know where I came from. And that eventually sort of localized around the Torah, because the Torah is the heart of the Jewish people.
So, as for perception, can you almost like compare it to a novel? So, say you're like reading a novel right now. In 5 years, due to life experience and everything, your like perception of that novel. So, like, say, I don't know, To Kill a Mockingbird, great novel. You might
Okay,
find
I
some
understand your
themes.
question. Yeah. So yes and no. The Torah is not a novel, right? So the premise of your question is a very good one. Does the text reflect itself back to you differently year in and year out? Now, I teach a Parshat HaShavua class to 300-400 people every week. And that's the same Parsha every week. And I've done it for almost 2 decades, right? So how many times can you read the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, and find something new in it, right? It's the same story, right? I know what happens at the end of the Torah. Moses dies, passes it on to Joshua. Do I really need to read it again? And the answer is yes, because the Torah is layered with so many nuances and secrets and puzzles that need to be put together that every year that you analyze it, there's something inside your own life experience that allows you to see something different, right? So I can remember walking into the Beit Midrash my first time. Beit Midrash, the house of study, right? So I was living in Israel, and I was very passionate, nationalistic, proud Zionist Jew. But I didn't have the textual substantive Jewish education to allow me to understand, Talmud, Torah, Halacha, Midrash. I didn't have that. So I go into a Beit Midrash, and I see just rows and rows and stacks of Jewish books, not so dissimilar from the ones that you see behind me. And I knew that if I started studying in that moment, and I studied every day for the rest of my life, I'd still just be scratching the surface of how much there is to know within Judaism, the religion of the Jewish people.